to now the third and final day of the online session of the first global meeting of national focal points to the Montevideo program. Please bear with us. We are just resolving some technical issues to ensure our co-chairs can be connected. We will be opening the meeting very shortly. Distinguished participants, once again, welcome back to the third and final day of the online session of the first global meeting of national focal points to the Montevideo Program 5. I have the honor of now handing it over to our co-chair, who will resume item 5, partnerships and stakeholder engagement. Mr. Co-chair, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches a todos. Distinguidos participantes.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all. We are going to continue. And we are going to resume our consideration of item 5 of the program, partnerships and stakeholder engagement. We had started this yesterday, of course. Now you will recall that in paragraph 4.1 of the Montevideo Program 5, we referred to the promotion of partnerships across the United Nations and with other relevant entities. I will ask you to look at the text of this paragraph. I'll refer you to it at the very least, and this of course includes civil society organizations active in the field of environmental law. Now all of us are well aware of how little time we have available to us. But this is a topic which requires a great deal of time. A lot more time at the very least than what we have been granted. And so, of course, we have to assume that we won't be able to make any decisions today. But all of the comments, all of the conclusions which we reach today will all be used to complement those of the previous session, and they will be included in the report. And for this reason, I am going to invite all those who wish to do so, and this is so we can save some time, is to send your comments in writing to the Secretariat, and that will enable us not to miss anything. And it also enable us to move swiftly forward and cover all of the agenda items. But I do have Sierra Leone, Congo, Malawi, United States, Guinea on my list. But I'm going to start by giving the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, you have the floor.
Veo en el chat que Sierra Leona nos avisa que tiene algunos problemas técnicos de conexión.
The discussion chat that Sierra Leone has warned us that they are facing connection mishaps. I will therefore move swiftly on to Congo. Congo, you have the floor. You have the floor, Congo. Makanga.
Mise Makamba, could you hear me? Creo que no tenemos conexión con el representante de Congo.
Unfortunately, no. We don't seem to be able to connect to him. Simply seems to be no connection to him. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep him on the list for later, but we're going to move swiftly on to Colombia. Marjorie, you have the floor.
Buenos días, señor presidente. Colombia ya tuvo la oportunidad de...
Good morning to all. Colombia already took the floor. We've had an opportunity to express ourselves yesterday on this very same topic, and so we don't wish to take the floor again. Thank you, Colombia, says the chair. Thank you. This will certainly save us some time. We're very grateful to you. We will now attempt to again yield the floor to a delegation. Malawi, can you hear us? Malawi, you have the floor.
Malawi también nos expresa en el chat.
Malawi, you have the floor. No, I see in the little event chat that they too are facing technical problems. We will give them a few minutes to attempt to overcome them. Malawi, I see you now. I see you online. I see you. You're connected.
Disappear.
But you have just disappeared again. Well, what can I say? Perhaps it is just too early in the morning to be able to hope for better connections. So let us move on to the next person on my list. We have Guinea this time.
Línea.
Guinea, I can't see you either. I do see you. I do see you. Mr. Kaba, you have the floor.
Soit très bien. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Monsieur le Co-président. Bonjour au panel d'experts des Nations Unies et d'autres pays membres des Nations Unies présents à cette première rencontre. D'abord, je vais vous dire que je voulais intervenir depuis le début.
To tell you that I wanted to speak earlier on, but I wasn't able to do so given the technical difficulties which you are familiar with. Every time I attempted to take the floor, I faced these mishaps. Turning now to item 5, the one we're currently discussing. I will, of course, send you Guinea's position on the other items on which Guinea was not in a position to express itself. But regarding item 5, partnerships, in Guinea, we have channels through which we often guide our decisions to the interpreter apologizes, but the delegate is freezing. For this, we have created a committee in every prefecture. It's a follow-up committee. It is an on-the-ground monitoring, and I'm afraid we've lost the delegate again. I would suggest that in terms of partnerships, that we take into account of the different forms of these structures. And we should also take into account the political and religious authorities locally, because generally speaking in Africa, religious leaders and politicians are often heard and heeded in our local community. So at an international level, I could not list all the different bodies through which we can have partnerships. But I'm taking into account of the diverse nature of the United Nations system structures, and we can have a fruitful partnership to ensure that the Montevideo 5 program enjoy a bright future within the framework of the implementation of our objectives. I thank you.
Muchas gracias, le agradezco mucho.
Thank you so much, says the co-chair. And now I'm going to give the floor to the representative of the United States. United States.
Oops. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay. I can't hear you, but I can see you nodding. Let me begin then. Thank you, co-chairs. Thank you, delegates and stakeholders. The U.S. fully supports cooperation, coordination, and partnership of these programs and activities with relevant stakeholders, with academics, with civil society organizations, and others as appropriate, promoting public participation, transparency, and accountability. In particular, we'd like to emphasize the role of citizen oversight to ensure government accountability. Citizens and civil society organizations exert public pressure through the opportunity to participate and lead in decision-making processes, including in the early stages of infrastructure and other development. They also ensure that governments uphold the rule of law through effective and open access to judicial and administrative proceedings. The topic under discussion here is that UNEP establishes partnerships to achieve the Montevideo program's member state determined priority areas of action. And UNEP has a long tradition going back to its initial formation in promoting the views of major groups and stakeholders. These partnerships have led to great success. For example, UNEP's partnership with member states, WHO, and NGOs in the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint has helped reduce lead exposure for vulnerable communities around the world. It is our view that the most effective way for states to foster a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is to adopt concrete legal provisions to protect the environment and protect access to information, and then to implement and enforce these provisions. States that lack effective enforcement mechanisms struggle to achieve a healthy environment. The United States is ready to share its experience in providing meaningful access to information, opportunities for public participation, and access to justice under our domestic framework, including the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Freedom of Information Act, and other U.S. laws and regulations. Thank you.
Gracias, Estados Unidos. Vamos a continuar.
Thank you so much, United States. And we're going to continue down our list. Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is the next speaker on my list. Camara.
Sierra Leona, si puede escucharnos. If you can hear me. No tenemos conexión con Sierra Leona. Vamos a intentar nuevamente con...
Have no connection with Sierra Leone. Let us attempt to listen to Congo.
Monsieur Makanga, ¿tiene usted conexión?
Congo, are you connected? Mr. Makanga? Yes, says Congo. Can you hear me? Thank you. I'd like to thank you for affording me the floor. I'd like to welcome all of you. Concerning, I'd like to say that we approve the idea of partnerships. It's a good thing and it's very important when it comes to the implementation of the Montevideo program. When it comes to the Republic of Congo, we have no formal partnerships between non-governmental organizations and our environmental administration and ministries. However, we have a number of NGOs, including very significant NGOs who are helping the state when it comes to implementing its program. I would like here to refer to the NGO ACEE, which is the Congolese Association for Environmental Evaluation and Assessment, and they have helped the state with environmental impact studies. And this NGO has continuously contributed to all environmental assessment exercises. There is a need to say, especially when it comes to African states, like my country, Congo, that these NGOs are very helpful in financial and technical terms. This is true of the partnership with the ILO and the interpreter couldn't hear the other organization in the field of forestry. I'm afraid the sound is cutting. And the ministry responsible for forestry has spent a great deal of time on the technical and financial aspects regarding monitoring and assessment of the state of our forest heritage. What I'm trying to say is that the successful implementation of the Montevideo program will perforce involve such partnerships. However, a question does arise: which NGOs should we select for these partnerships, and in which sectors should we work with them? This is the questions we are facing, and this is all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Congo.
So much, Congo. I'm now going to give the floor to Malawi. Another attempt to give the floor to Malawi.
¿Ya? Lamentablemente no se ha resuelto el problema de conexión con el...
Well, unfortunately, it doesn't seem as if we were able to overcome the connection problem with our colleague from Malawi. We were not successful in our attempts. So what we're going to do is we're just going to continue going down the list of speakers. And in fact, I'm going to close the list now. And then I'm going to give the floor to the representative of Cameroon.
Tiene la palabra.
Monsieur le Président, de me passer la parole.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to participate in this meeting. Yesterday, unfortunately, our connection was cut and I didn't have an opportunity to extend to you our congratulations upon your election to this co-chairmanship. As far as we're concerned, everything is going very well, and we are gratified by this. Now, regarding this item on partnerships and stakeholders, this is absolutely crucial for the Montevideo program insofar as it focuses on the inclusive nature of the program. Within the framework of this item, we would like to share our experience in terms of access to information, environmental information, in terms of participation. We believe that participation, engagement, access to information is what breathes life into environmental law. And it behooves me to recall here that within the framework of discussions on the Global Environmental Pact, it has been recognized within the framework of the working group that all exercises in consideration on the future of environmental law, on future conventions in the field of the environment, should closely involve the Montevideo program. We are gratified to see that the program is slowly gaining significant recognition at a global level. And we believe that any initiative, as part and parcel of which one would involve the Montevideo program, will certainly be one which will be worthy of our country's support. And those types of initiatives will be ones that we will back to ensure that both the domestic and international level, we see international environmental law flourish. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Vamos a
Thank you, says the chair. Well, we have come to the end of our list of speakers, so we're going to go back and make a few further attempts to reach out to Sierra Leone. You have the floor. Kamara?
Lamentablemente no parece.
Fortunately. No. Regrettably, we still are not in a position to listen to Sierra Leone, but I do see Guinea. Can you hear us, Guinea? Do you wish to take the floor?
Je vous reçois très bien.
I hear you loud and clear, says Guinea. Co-chairs, I can hear you. The sound keeps cutting, unfortunately. The Environmental Monitoring Committee is a structure which is composed of unions, of civil society, of all the structures involved in activities or active in the field of activities which can harm the environment. And these environmental committees are represented through women's groups and other professional social groups. So in every region, one has all of these social and professional structures, and all of them are coordinated by the Director for the Environment of the region, and he is the focal point for the Ministry of the Environment. And he is accountable to the relevant authority for the implementation of downstream decisions, which then need to be moved upstream to the state to ensure that the state approves them. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Con estas intervenciones damos.
Thank you very much. Well, it does seem as if we have finished on this agenda item, and as I said at the beginning of the meeting, all of these comments are very interesting ones, and all these proposals are ones which will of course be included in the report. The Secretariat has taken good note of them, and I'm going to give the floor to my co-chair, Tim. Tim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marcelo, and delegates and observers, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are now beginning the agenda item that we had planned for the start of our final day. And of course, we're a half an hour into our final day. So we must move with speed so that we can reach conclusion as quickly as possible. Let's now turn to agenda item 6A, the designation of steering committee for implementation. And my understanding is that there are several regional groups who would like to speak to their designation of steering committee members. And so I invite you to please raise your hand if you're a representative of a regional group and would like to speak to your designated representatives. I recognize Argentina. You have the floor.
Muy buenos días, ¿me escuchan? Do you hear me?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning to all. Dear colleagues, as the representative of GRULAC, you all know that GRULAC is currently being chaired by Argentina in Nairobi, Kenya. Well, we held a meeting at a regional level regarding item 6 with our colleagues from GRULAC, and we have decided to propose the following nominations. We would like to propose Dr. Marcelo Cosillas, National Focal Point, at the Legal Department for the Environment of Uruguay, Mr. Castro Moreno, Focal Point, and Deputy Minister at the Ministry for Environmental Affairs of the Republic of Peru, and Ms. Kate Wilson, National Focal Point, and legal head of the legal department of the Environmental Ministry of St. Lucia. I would also like to inform you that we have followed all of the applicable criteria in terms of gender and equitable geographical distribution and focal points. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina, on behalf of GRULAC. I believe there was at least one more regional group that wanted to speak to the regional group nominations. But I'm not seeing a hand up at this point. So for the other representatives to the steering committee, I'm going to turn it over to the Secretariat to present the regional group nominations for the steering committee. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear participants. The Secretariat confirms that it has received nominations from the African states, from the Asia-Pacific states, from the Eastern European states, and from the Western European and other states, in addition to the nominations received from the Latin American and Caribbean states, as indicated by the distinguished representative from Argentina. I now invite my colleague Marina to project on the screen the full list of nominations received for the Steering Committee for Implementation. Thank you, Chair.
And I'm pausing here to allow folks to read the screen. And Secretariat, were you going to read through the names, or at this point, I think I'm ready to turn to the body, and I would like to now to invite the meeting to designate the members indicated for the Steering Committee for Implementation, and to do so by acclamation. Please indicate whether whether there are any concerns or objections, and I'm seeing no hands raised. So let us view this list as adopted by acclamation. Congratulations to the members of the first Steering Committee for Implementation of the Montevideo Environmental Law Program. As indicated in the annotations to the provisional agenda, the Steering Committee that we have just designated will serve until the end of the second global meeting of National Focal Points. I now turn the floor to my co-chair for our next agenda item, Marcelo.
Thank you, team. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you, everyone.
Pasaremos entonces ahora a considerar el punto 6B.
We'll now be looking at item 6B in our program, modalities of work for the Steering Committee for Implementation for the Montevideo Program. This is document UNEP/env.law/mtv/GNPF.1/5. As you can see, in paragraph 6C of the Montevideo program establishes, among other things, that the Secretariat will develop draft modalities for work of the Steering Committee for Implementation, which would be presented at the first global meeting for consideration and adoption. The Secretariat has indeed drafted and shared draft modalities of work together with the other meeting documents. You may recall that during our first session on the 2nd of June, last Tuesday, we asked Focal Points to present any comments or inputs in writing to the Secretariat, any observations, any contributions in advance of consideration of this agenda item today. I therefore request the Secretariat to briefly present the draft modalities of work for the Steering Committee for the Implementation, together with a summary of the written comments, observations, or inputs for our consideration and possible adoption. Secretariat You have the floor.
Maria, please.
As indicated by the co-chairs, on the basis of the request made for any written comments and submissions to be made to us, the Secretariat compiled all the submissions received as of 7 p.m. yesterday, the 3rd of June, 2021. In particular, we received 9 submissions from Benin, Burkina Faso, Canada, China, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Jamaica, Switzerland, United States, and Zambia. These submissions have been compiled, and the compilation posted on LEAP this morning. The same compilation was sent out by email to all national focal points. Textual proposals in French and English have been inserted in the appropriate places in the English version of the draft modalities, with French textual proposals having been unofficially translated by the Secretariat. Comments as received have also been added to the same document, with informal translations of the comments that were not sent into English. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Muchas gracias, María.
Thank you very much, Maria and the Secretariat. They have done considerable work in gathering all of these contributions, which are great importance for our discussions. I'm now going to give the floor for comments and observations. I'm going to ask the delegations to focus on those aspects that have required changes or modifications, and that in the text, in fact, that was put on the platform by the Secretariat for our consideration. I can't see. In fact, I see that no one has asked to take the floor. I see no raised hands. Consequently, we are now able to propose a document that was drafted by the co-chairs in cooperation with the Secretariat, and that intends to include the comments that were sent ahead of the session. Some of those changes were changes in terminology with the view to propose it for adoption. So I'm going to now propose to the Secretariat that they now project the text that was finalized with support by the co-chairs, with support from the Secretariat.
Just projected on the screen a marked up version of the draft modalities document containing the proposals by the co-chairs, that is on the basis of the submissions that had been received as of 7 p.m. Thank you.
Gracias, Secretaría.
I'd like to thank the Secretariat. If I may, I'd like to make a brief summary of the modifications that have been introduced by the co-chairs. I'd like to point to the fact that the document put on the platform by the Secretariat, to that document we have added a clarification, paragraph 1, so as to improve the language and make it clear that the members of the steering committee have to be national coordinators of one of the member states. Secondly, we've introduced a slight change to paragraph 5 with a view to clarify that were one of the members of the steering committee not be able to attend the meeting, the member state will appoint someone to fill the role of national coordinator who would be able to attend the meeting. Thirdly, we've attempted to clarify, improve the language in paragraphs, or in paragraph 7. I'm terribly sorry, it's kind of difficult for me to see the screen, says the chairman. These changes were made to make it clear the conditions under which members of the steering committee will fulfill their responsibilities. Fourthly, we adjusted paragraph 9 so that the appointment of the co-chairs and the rapporteur for the steering committee be done as quickly as possible, also taking into consideration that the steering committee will hold at least one meeting per year. I've just listed or mentioned the most significant changes that the co-chairs have made to this document and that we are now presenting to you. These are changes made to the text that was circulated by the Secretariat via the LEAP platform. That document already included, hopefully, all of the contributions made by the delegates. So bearing in mind these considerations, I'm now going to give the floor to the delegations that have requested the floor, calling on them once again to try to focus on those parts that have been modified and that merit comment. I have the delegation of Burkina Faso on the top of my list. The floor is yours. Good morning, dear co-chairs, and good morning, colleagues and delegates. If the chairs allow me, I'd like to go back to look at a detail that I was unable to pick up in my observations. It's the part on working languages. I would like the document to indicate that the working languages for the committee will be all UN languages, and that the reports will also be translated into all UN languages. I think that this is something that we need to put in the report.
Gracias, Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. We're then going to ask the Secretariat to shed light on this possibility. Can we include this change? We have to take into consideration budget restrictions, specifically budget restrictions when it comes to simultaneous interpretation. I believe that that is not the case for written translations of the reports. Perhaps we can deal with those in a separately. So Secretariat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Co-Chair. On the matter of the working languages of the steering committee, interpretation during the meetings of the steering committee would be subject to the availability of financial resources. And ordinarily, the meetings are conducted in English. However, the report of the steering committee would be an official document for the global meeting of the national focal points, and that written report would be made available in all the official languages of the United Nations. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Secretaría.
Thank you, Secretariat. I'd now like to give the floor to the representative from China.
The interpreter doesn't hear anything at this point.
I'm terribly sorry, the interpreter cannot hear.
Yes,
Excuse me, China.
the interpreter apologizes. I don't hear anything.
Could you restart, please?
The interpreter in the English booth cannot hear anything.
A través del chat, el representante de China nos indica que tiene problemas técnicos.
目前
De manera que le agradecemos el aviso y continuamos la lista de oradores con el representante de Zambia. Karen Banda tiene la palabra.
Mr. Co-Chair, and good afternoon to all the delegates. Mine is just a follow-up clarification on the issue of translation. I appreciate the response that has been given by Secretariat concerning financial constraints as being a reason why we could not have more than one language. So I just want to appreciate how exactly that will play out in the meetings, considering that we could have national focal points in the steering committee that are not conversant with the English language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zambia, for conveying your concerns. In this type of committee, usually the practice is we have to take into account budgetary restrictions. We're going to, of course, trying to work with support from the Secretariat. Shudi Daniel from Trinidad Tobago, you have the floor. I can see that the delegate from Trinidad and Tobago is connected, but we can't seem to be able to hear him or her.
Even I lost the connection, yes? You're waiting on me right now.
Lamentablemente hemos perdido conexión con Trinidad.
Unfortunately, we've lost Trinidad Tobago. We're going to continue with the delegate from Canada. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think you see and hear me, right? Excellent, thank you. And thank you to the Secretariat for presenting this revised document at great speed and with great efficiency. We can accept the text as we see it. I just nevertheless wanted to share one comment very briefly, expressing my sympathy for the written comment that we have seen from our colleague from Zambia in relation to paragraph 11 of the text. On the need to establish the date, time, and venue of the next meeting, maybe a year in advance, up to a year in advance, that maybe it's a bit rigid and that inserting a little more flexibility in the text might be in order. Not a hard issue for us, but again, having in mind that it is a 15-member group, maybe we can allow it a little more flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Your proposal, your flexible proposal is appreciated. We are now going to give the floor to the delegate from Ghana. Ghana, the floor is yours. Ms. Avena, the floor is yours.
Mr. Co-Chair, this is Sabina from Ghana. On the issue of the reports, from the Secretariat, we appreciate the financial constraints, but are the reports going to just be in English, or it's going to be in 2 languages? Because from our end, we have our representative from the French-speaking countries. So we'll appreciate if they can clarify the issue on the report, whether it's going to be on in other languages such as French or any other languages, or just English. Thank you.
Gracias, Ghana. Sí, tendremos
Thank you, Ghana. We have representatives who are English-speaking and French, also from other official languages at the UN. What kind of interpretation is available depends on budgetary restrictions. This is why the working language will be English. However, if we do find resources, there will be simultaneous interpretation into the other languages. It has been made clear to us that the documents will be translated into all UN official languages. And with that, we have provided clarifications. That is to say that we've indicated what can be done on the basis of resources that will be made available. I will now give the floor to the representative from Cameroon.
For giving me the floor. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I understand the statement of the Secretariat with regard to budget constraints, but we should also take in consideration the fact that every member of the steering committee needs to understand what is being said at the committee and act accordingly. So we need to be flexible with regard to that issue. We can see maybe the list of the member of the steering committee, and if we go through that list, we will realize that we don't need more than 2 or 3 simultaneous interpretations. So we need to be flexible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameroon. No one else has requested to take the floor. Just 1 second. I can now give the floor to St. Lucia. Kate Wilson, the floor is yours.
Good morning, co-chairs, representatives of the Secretariat, Madam Rapporteur, fellow national focal points, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. St. Lucia welcomes the revised modalities, draft modalities for the work of this, for the composition of the steering committee. We are sympathetic to the concerns of the other national focal points about the languages, but we believe that the Secretariat has provided a reasonable working way forward, that once the budgetary resources are available, that simultaneous interpretation will be given, but more importantly, that the reports will be translated in all the UN languages. So we want to indicate that the updates that were made to the various sections of the draft, we accept, and Lucia accepts the updated modalities, and we are ready to move forward. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Santa Lucía. Vamos a continuar enseguida con la lista de oradores.
Thank you, St. Lucia. And I continue with my list. Well, no, I'm going to first turn to the Secretariat and ask them to clarify certain of the questions which were put to us in the event chat regarding the documents currently being considered. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I believe that there were two questions from China found in the chat, and my colleagues who are reading the chat can assist me if I miss any questions. The first question was with regard to how China's proposal on regional meetings before the meeting of the steering committee had been taken into account. That proposal is reflected in the second sentence of what is now paragraph 9. And just to read it and to highlight it, it says, prior to any such meeting, meaning the meeting of the steering committee, members of the steering committee should, to the extent possible, consult with national focal points in the relevant United Nations regional group. And I'll highlight it on the screen so that everybody is clear about which sentence I was just reading out. With regard to the second question about what this document is, what we are projecting on the screen is the co-chair's proposal on the modalities. So the modalities that you had received, the draft you had received prior to the meeting, now contains revisions that are based on the written proposals and comments that were received as of last night. Thank you. They have also been posted on Leap. So this document is also found on Leap if you would like to download your own copy of the document. Thank you.
Gracias, Secretaría. Creo que esto deja claro entonces la pertinencia.
For these explanations, I think that you have now understood the relevance of this document and the way it's linked to the previous one. I give the floor to Sierra Leone.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Sí. Sí. Yes.
Can you? Box yesterday, I think in yesterday's meeting or the first day, in terms of the financing of the program, and I remember the Secretariat making the point that voluntary contributions from government may be welcome. So I asked the questions, how is the communication of that voluntary communication being made? Because that is crucial. Is it the role of the focal person to communicate this issue of voluntary contribution, or is the role of UNEP or probably the Secretariat? We need clarity on that, because for this program to succeed, I think countries have to give their own commitment to it as well. And that's the only way we can also have a buy-in, a political buy-in of the program itself, to raise, the level of the programs in the country, the understanding. So I would like a clarification on that. How are we going to make that communication? Is the communication going to come from UNEP?
Gracias, Sierra Leona. Entiendo que su consulta no está directamente vinculada a las modalidades de trabajo del comité directivo.
Comment is related with the modalities, the working modalities with the steering committee. But since you asked the question, I will turn to the Secretariat and ask them to provide us with any additional explanations regarding the modalities for the regular operations of UNEP in terms of voluntary contributions, to respond and reply to your question. So I'm going to give the floor now to the Secretariat. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, for giving us the floor to respond to the question from the distinguished delegate from Sierra Leone. With respect to funding of the program, we would turn your attention to, first, the report of the Executive Director to the 5th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, where the Executive Director reported to the meeting that we were actively seeking contributions to the program in her report on the status of funding, as called for by UNEA Resolution 420 on the program. In that report, the Executive Director did repeat the call seeking contributions from governments and other entities as outlined in the program. Secondly, I would note to distinguished participants that as Secretariat, we have responsibilities under the program to seek to procure funding. And that does include, as reported in our report on the status of funding, that includes consideration of establishment of a trust fund. And as reported on the first day of this meeting, the Secretariat will be examining the funding position of the program in July 2021 this year, and if necessary, seeking or starting the process to consider establishment of a trust fund for this program. I can thirdly report that as Secretariat, in fulfilling those duties, we will be continuing to reach out to the donor community and entities to seek to procure funding for the program. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Gracias, Andy. Gracias, Secretaría. Creo que ha sido un...
The Secretariat, you have shed a great deal of light with your clear explanations. This was most useful. We are here referring to aspects related to the budget, and the contributions of this program are essential in nature. They're essential for the effectiveness. I have no further requests on my list. No requests for the floor on this topic. I believe that we can consider that we have reached agreement on a text which combines all the necessary elements which will enable the steering committee to operate correctly. You here have modalities appropriate modalities for the work of the committee, and on the basis of consensus, this committee will be in a position to discharge its mission. I see the representative of China requesting the floor. China? Fu, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? China, well, would like to thank the Secretariat and the co-chairs for your taking into account of our proposals, especially paragraph 9. We're happy to see that some points have been included. However, we would not know that the steering committee members should, in advance, should hold discussions with each other. So we hope that Secretariat could have a more explicit inclusion of my proposal. That is to say that the agenda of the steering committee should be fully considered, and also the member states should be fully consulted in advance. For the exact wording, we have sent an email to the Secretariat, and we hope that that would be reflected in that paragraph in the proper way. Thank you.
Gracias, China. Creo que ha quedado claro que todos damos.
Thank you, China. Well, we have understood correctly. We have understood the thrust of your contribution. It is important that the regional groups be appropriately represented and that their work be promoted, and your proposal will be taken into account. The Secretariat has requested the floor to add a few elements to this. Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I was going to make a technical point about paragraph 5, but did you want me to address the point of China?
Sí, por favor.
So indeed, thank you. Indeed, we had not taken the full text that China had provided, which specifies that elements of the agenda for the steering committee should be part of the regional consultations and other details. Our understanding, though, is that in the consultations that will be done by the steering committee members within their regions, the elements indicated in China's proposal would be considered in those consultations. Thank you.
Gracias, Secretaría.
Thank you so much to the Secretariat. Chairman, can I revisit paragraph 5? Yes, please go ahead, Maria.
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair. One of the proposals that had been made to paragraph 5 is to move the text that says steering committee, which I'm highlighting now, before the word member, to remove the unclarity about whether it is a member state or a member of the steering committee that is being referred to when we talk about alternate members. Unfortunately, if that is done and you read the sentence, it now reads as though it is the member state that has designated the steering committee member, when in fact it is the meeting of national focal points that has designated the steering committee member So the proposal from the Secretariat, unless there are objections, is that we revert to the original formulation and to say a member state having designated as a member of the steering committee, a national focal point, etc. It's a technical point, co-chair, because this phrasing is not legally correct. Thank you.
Gracias, María. Gracias, Secretaría. Es muy adecuado lo que nos señala. Estamos trabajando en un texto en inglés que debe tener un contenido jurídico adecuado, de manera que...
This would enable us to adopt this text once it has been finalized. I'd like to again express my pleasure at the fact that we have achieved consensus regarding our working modalities. These modalities for the work of the steering committee for the implementation of the program is a crucial point on our agenda. This will enable the program, the Montevideo program, to be operational as rapidly as is possible. In these, if there are no further requests for the floor, I am going to turn to Tim, my co-chair, if he wants to take the floor.
Hello, Marcelo. I do not want to take the floor on the agenda item that you're currently on. I was preparing myself to take the floor on the next agenda item.
Correcto, gracias, Tim. Muy bien, en ese caso, el proyecto de modalidades de trabajo del Comité Directivo para la
for the implementation of the Montevideo program has been adopted after we have taken into account all of the proposals shared both in writing and orally, and will be included in the co-chair's document, which has been presented just now. I can ask the Secretariat at this point to present to us a cleaned up document, a cleaned up text, which will be presented to all the participants. You'll also see that in paragraph 4 of the modalities, it says that the members of the steering committee begin their terms of office at the closure of the global meeting at which they're designated, and should remain in office until the closure of the next global meeting. Since the last meeting took place before the adoption of the working modalities, these provisions regarding the beginning of the mandate will not apply to this first steering committee. In other words, the mandates of the members of the steering committee who have just been appointed will start immediately after the closure of this virtual meeting. Rather than after the closure next year, after the in-person meeting. This is a very important point. it's important for this program to be led by a steering committee, a full steering committee, and we should have this before we have our in-person meeting next year. And this is why I would ask the Secretariat to include all of these elements in the report of the meeting. It is very important that the steering committee should be operational as rapidly as is possible. And I want to again stress the importance of all of these measures for the implementation of this program. I'm going to give the floor to my co-chair, Tim. You have the floor, Tim.
Thank you, Marcelo. I take it that we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, item 8. Yes. So we have made much progress in this meeting so far, and it's quite impressive what we have accomplished. Thank you all. Thank you, Marcelo, for taking us through that important document. And now we turn to agenda item 8, other matters. May I ask whether there are other matters that delegations may want us to consider at this point? I am seeing no hands, so we are making good speed of our work, achieving more quickly than we had anticipated. I'm giving a little bit more time just in case anybody wants to raise something under other matters. I see no hands at this point. And so I am now going to hand the floor back to my co-chair, Marcelo, for the next item on our agenda.
Thank you, Tim. Tu trabajo ha sido muy liviano hoy. Deberíamos recargar un poco más la agenda para mi co-chair. Distinguidos participantes,
We should have. Oh God, this mic. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates, I ask you to familiarize yourself with agenda item 9, adoption of the outcomes of the meeting. Ms. Kunsang, our rapporteur, has worked with my fellow co-chair, Tim, and with the Secretariat. We have prepared a summary of the meeting.
voy a solicitarle a la Secretaría que clarifique si ya ha sido distribuido o si estamos en condiciones de presentarlo en este momento. Secretaría tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just to confirm that the Co-Chair's summary is now available, and with your permission, we can distribute this to participants through email, and we will also post it on UNEP Leap. So just to confirm, it is available, and we respectfully defer to you on whether you would like to read the co-chair's summary to participants now, or whether you are satisfied to keep it as posted. But we defer to you on this, Mr. Co-Chair.
Gracias, Secretaría. Creo que tenemos tiempo suficiente para que sea leído. Le agradezco a la Secretaría si pudiera leerlo para la sala. Le cedo la palabra a la Secretaría. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We would be happy to read the Co-Chair's summary. So, distinguished participants, just before we begin, just to clarify that this is now being posted on UNEP Leap, and I kindly ask my colleague to post it on UNEP Leap. And I will now proceed to read the Co-Chair's summary. Opening of the meeting. The Co-Chair's summary, as you will see, reports that the meeting opened at 3:02 p.m. Nairobi time on the 2nd of June 2021. Mr. Arnold Krauch-Huber, the Acting Director of the Law Division of UNEP, welcomed participants and then invited Ms. Inger Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP, to provide opening remarks. Ms. Anderson underscored the significance of the Montevideo Programme 5 as a flagship programme for UNEP and encouraged member states to engage with the programme to strengthen environmental rule of law across the globe. Furthermore, Ms. Anderson, inter alia, welcomed collaboration and engagement with partners including UN agencies, secretariats of multilateral environmental agreements, civil society organizations, academic institutions, and the private sector in delivering this program. The Executive Director concluded by highlighting that the online session is a significant step to start substantive activities under the program, which will contribute to achieving a sustainable and just future for all. Distinguished participants, under item 2, you will see the Co-Chair's summary regarding organizational matters to state that Mr. Timothy Arep of the United States of America and Mr. Marcelo Cusullas of Uruguay were elected as co-chairs of the meeting. Ms. Kunzang of the Kingdom of Bhutan was elected as rapporteur. In their opening remarks, the co-chairs noted, inter alia, that the online session of the first global meeting of national focal points is an opportunity for national focal points to provide guidance on what should be the initial priorities for implementation, to designate a steering committee for implementation, and to adopt its modalities of work. Following the election of officers, the agenda for the meeting was adopted. The organisation of work was also adopted, with 2 additional suggestions from the co-chairs, being organisation of informal consultations for regional groups to discuss nominees for the steering committee, and an invitation to national focal points to submit textual comments on the draft modalities of work. Under item 3, national focal points, the Secretariat introduced a report on the status of national focal points, highlighting that member states had designated a total of 136 national focal points as of the 2nd of June 2021. The Secretariat also stated that an up-to-date list of all national focal points is maintained on UNEP Leap, which is available, as you know, at www.leap.unep.org. The Secretariat also invited national focal points to communicate by email any errors or omissions in the list of focal points. Distinguished participants, under item 4, status of implementation activities and funding, the Secretariat introduced a report on the above title. And in that report, the Secretariat highlighted a series of preparatory activities undertaken to ensure effective implementation following the first global meeting. Amongst others, this included the development of the UNEP Law and Environment Assistance Platform, which was launched by the Secretariat. Several delegations welcomed the launch of the platform. The Secretariat reported that there was no dedicated funding currently available to implement Montevideo Programme 5. It noted, in accordance with the requirements of the programme adopted by member states, it would, if necessary, consider the establishment of a trust fund to provide for dedicated funding to the programme. Under item 5, priority areas for implementation, the co-chair recalled that the program tasks national focal points to identify priority areas for implementation of the program. He noted that for the online session, national focal points have been asked to identify a limited number of focused and feasible priority areas for implementation, underscoring that this could be perhaps 1 or 2 areas to enable substantive activities under the program to start. The co-chair reminded participants that the in-person session in 2022 will provide room for more robust discussions and negotiations concerning the priorities for the program. The Secretariat then presented 8 proposed areas for implementation and 1 initial priority area for implementation, being legal responses to address the air pollution crisis. Some delegations suggested additional initial priorities, including public participation, access to information and access to justice, climate change, biodiversity, and strengthening education and training on environmental law. Delegations also stressed that transboundary issues should be specifically considered, including within the context of air pollution. There was broad consensus amongst delegations that air pollution should be the initial priority area for implementation for the program. Accordingly, the meeting adopted Annex 1 of document number UNEP/ENV.law/MTV5/GNFP.1/4. Several delegations underscored additional priorities that should be included or further articulated into the broader set of proposed priorities for implementation. Suggestions included environmental finance, trade in used goods, sustainable agriculture, water and marine pollution, and illegal trade in wildlife and chemicals and waste. One delegation suggested reducing the number of priority areas to become more focused on achieving results. The co-chairs stated that all interventions would be reflected in the meeting report and that priority areas would be further discussed in detail at the 2022 in-person resumed session of the first global meeting. Distinguished participants under item 6, partnerships and stakeholder engagement, the co-chair noted that partnerships are central to Montevideo Program 5. And following a presentation by the Secretariat, many delegations underscored the critical importance of partnerships and stakeholder engagement for the success of the program. One delegation suggested the Secretariat, in collaboration with the Steering Committee for Implementation, should develop a working document to clearly outline the program strategy on building partnerships and stakeholder engagement, and several delegations supported this proposal. Several delegations provided suggestions on areas of focus and important considerations regarding partnerships and stakeholder engagement. These included ensuring linkages and coherence amongst global, regional, national, and subnational levels, engaging the security sector, ensuring coherence with other environmental law-focused entities and programs, engaging with regional and sub-regional entities, engaging judiciaries and developing a judicial portal, engaging law students and academics, showcasing research, engaging media, facilitating nexus dialogues amongst stakeholders, and linking up countries to donors and funding opportunities under other programs and initiatives. Some delegations noted that governments should play a key role in determining partnerships at national and local level. One delegate stressed that when engaging children and youth, engagement must be meaningful and rights-based, and that children and youth should be engaged throughout the whole policy process as an equal partner and stakeholder at all levels. The delegate also noted the importance of meeting young people where they are and the need to build their capacity and empower them as implementers of environmental governance and policies. The co-chair advised that partnerships and stakeholder engagement will be considered in greater detail during the resumed in-person session. Distinguished participants, regarding item 6, the Steering Committee for Implementation, the co-chair recalled paragraph 6C of the program that states that national focal points will, at their global meetings, designate a steering committee for implementation, composed of 2 to 3 representatives nominated from each United Nations region, ensuring gender balance to the extent possible. National Focal Points designated the following representatives to serve on the first Steering Committee for Implementation. Under African states, Mr. Gontran Som of Burkina Faso, Ms. Sarah Nagaga from Uganda, Ms. Karen Banda from Zambia, and distinguished participants, please excuse any pronunciation difficulties. From the Asia Pacific states, Mr. Ashafqul Islam Babul from Bangladesh, Ms. Kun Zhang from Bhutan, and Mr. Moninit Van from Cambodia. From Eastern European states, Ms. Azra Rojovic Grubik from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ms. Tanja Puchel Vidojic from Slovenia. From Latin American and Caribbean states, Mr. Marino Castro from Peru, Ms. Kate Wilson from St. Lucia, and Mr. Marcelo Cusias from Uruguay. And finally, from Western European and other states, Ms. Charlotte von Treul from Finland, Mr. Vincent Brochenblust from Switzerland, and Mr. Timothy R. Epp from the United States of America. Delegations congratulated the newly designated steering committee members and then considered the draft modalities of work for the steering committee for implementation. The co-chair presented a revised draft prepared by the co-chairs reflecting key proposed amendments received from delegations on or before 3 June 2021. Some delegations suggested that meetings and reports of the Steering Committee for Implementation should be conducted in all UN languages. The Secretariat clarified that all meeting reports would be translated into all UN languages when presented to global meetings of national focal points. It further clarified that interpretation services would be provided for meetings of the Steering Committee for Implementation, subject to available resources. One delegation stressed the need for members of the Steering Committee for Implementation to consult with member states in their regions prior to any meeting of the Steering Committee for Implementation. The meeting adopted the modalities of work for the Steering Committee for Implementation as amended, and on the understanding that notwithstanding paragraph 4 of the document, the Steering Committee members shall begin their term of office at the closure of the online session of the first global meeting and continue until the closure of the second global meeting of national focal points. Distinguished participants, under item 8, other matters, no other matters were raised by the meeting. And then under item 9, adoption of the outcomes of the meeting, the co-chair invited the Secretariat to present the co-chair's summary of the meeting, and we expect we'll note that the rapporteur will finalize and circulate the full report of the online session after the meeting with the support of the Secretariat. Mr. Co-Chair, I do note that your co-chair's summary does then include a final item on closure of the meeting, but I now hand it back to you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Gracias, Andy.
Thank you, Andy, for the report and for reading out the report. The rapporteur will complete the report with the help from the Secretariat. It will be then circulated to the delegates. The Secretariat will prepare the official report and will be a record of the decisions that we have made here. At this point, I would like to ask if any of the delegations would like to take the floor to make any comments or on the draft report that has been read out. The floor is open for comments. Would anybody like to take the floor? The delegation from Santa Lucia, Kate Wilson, the floor is yours.
Chairman, St. Lucia would like at this point to thank the UN Montevideo 5 Secretariat, the co-chairs in the persons of Mr. Timothy Epp and Dr. Kusilas, Marcello Kusilas, global national focal points, other invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. We want to say how pleased we were with the conduct of the meeting, the 3-day meeting. It was efficient. We were able to reach consensus on some of the key issues, the main issues, on all of the issues. And we are very pleased with the report as produced by the summary of the report as produced. And we look forward to the final version as presented by the rapporteur in conjunction with the UN Secretariat being circulated to us. We look forward to the in-person session where we can continue deliberations on some of the key issues that we identified today. So once again, we want to thank you for your excellent work and look forward to continued deliberations. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Santa Lucia.
I'd like to thank Santa Lucia. Thank you very much for your intervention. I'd now like to give the floor to the representative from Cameroon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for having given me the floor. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank both co-chairs. I'd like to thank the team that did all of the work. I'm very satisfied with the quality of our exchanges during this 3-day meeting. For technical reasons, I was not able to attend yesterday's session. And I'd like to know what happened with item 7. I have not heard anything relative to item 7. So I'd like some news as to what went on with item 7 yesterday. Thank you. Thank you very much, Cameroon. Yes, we did not look at item 7, which is the venue and dates for the next meeting, and that because of the special situation in which we find ourselves. We've left item 7 open so that the venue and dates can be established with support from the steering committee, taking into account how things evolve. I don't know if the Secretariat can add any further clarification to item 7. Secretariat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Co-Chair. With regard to item 7, as indicated in the annotations, this matter will be discussed at the in-person meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Secretariat. I see that there are no other requests to take the floor. So, with that, we can conclude that The report that was presented will be used as a basis for the drafting of the final document. It will be completed by the Secretariat and circulated by the Secretariat. I now give the floor to my co-chair, Tim.
Thank you, distinguished co-chair. We now are at agenda item 10, the closure of the meeting. Distinguished participants, we have now come to the end of the online session of the first global meeting of the National Focal Points under the 5th Program for the Development and Periodic Review of Environmental Law. Let's step back a moment. The UN Environment Assembly adopted this 5th program in 2019. This 5th program was supposed to start last year in 2020, but because of the global pandemic, we were not able to hold the first meeting that year, the first meeting of the National Focal Points. And we thank you for working with us, working with the Secretariat in order to bifurcate this first meeting into this virtual session that we have just concluded or are just concluding and future in-person session. And what we have done, what you all have accomplished in this first session, the virtual session, is reached conclusion on those key items necessary to get the program started. We have identified an initial steering committee, adopted modalities for that steering committee, and identified at least one initial priority area for action so that the Secretariat can get started working on it with the steering committee, and so that another year is not lost to this global pandemic. Extremely heartened by this accomplishment, and I know that when we were discussing the initial priority areas for action, many of you were raising additional important areas beyond the one area that we have so far adopted as our initial area. And I will speak from my personal point of view as the head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Area's National Freedom of Information Office. The particular topic of access to information, public participation, and remedy and redress is keenly important to me. And I know that is one of the areas that a number of delegations expressed as an additional important area. And I look forward to our in-face meeting where those additional important areas can be brought up and that we can fill out the agenda for the remaining part of the decade. But at this point, it's great that we are, in the face of this global pandemic, been able to hold this virtual meeting so efficiently. I want to express a gratitude to the Secretariat for all of the prep work that you all did to help make and ensure the success of this meeting, for all of the support that you have provided during this meeting. And now let me pause a second and ask my distinguished co-chair, would you like to also make a closing statement at this time?
Thank you, team.
I'd like to thank you, Tim, for co-chairing Thank you for the work that you helped us do on environmental law. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for their efforts and for helping maintaining the program during the pandemic. Thank you for organizing this first meeting, which is so important to getting started. And I'd like to thank everyone, the national coordinators that are present. I'd like to thank all the states parties who are going to make the program possible and make it a reality. I think that the program is has much potential, has a possibility of creating tools for us for our daily work. I'd like to, as we have a few minutes left, I would like to see if I can share my screen with you. May I share my screen? Yes, I can share my screen. So now you see my screen. I'd like to tell you about something that happened to me yesterday. What you see here, can you see it? Can you all see my screen? The interpreter can see his screen. This is a postage stamp that dates from 1981. Yesterday, I had a stamp collector contact me. You may not be aware of the fact that there are still people collecting postal stamps. Well, this collector had a stamp in his possession that was 40 years old. It was printed by the Uruguay Postal Service to commemorate the senior level meeting on environmental law that led to the Montevideo program in 1981. You can see the wheel of justice, which is part of Oriental culture, not necessarily Western culture. This stamp was used as its slogan, Ubi natura et vita ibis jus, where nature and life are compatible, where a situation in which they exist. This, in fact, could be a museum piece. I wanted to show to you, not just because the collector contacted me to talk to me about it, but also because I wanted to compare it to the current reality, the current Montevideo program. And I think that we can see today's reality through very concrete examples, such as this virtual meeting. I'm speaking to you from the city of Montevideo, for example. But we also have available to us an electronic platform, a sign of the times, a sign of the changes that we have working in environmental law have to adapt to. Thank you very much. I'd like to beg the delegates' indulgence for having shown you these pictures, but I really wanted to not pass by this opportunity to share with you this very interesting thing that happened to me yesterday. And with that, I wanted to close the meeting on a note of optimism for all. Thank you very much, Tim. I give the floor back to you.
Marcelo, thank you so much for sharing that. It's a great and very fitting expression of how much the program has changed and how much the program remains at its core foundation about the development of environmental law and about justice in environmental matters. Thank you so much for sharing that. This has been a challenging session. Our communication through an electronic virtual meeting platform has not been without some degree of technical difficulties along the way. And I thank all of the distinguished participants for bearing with us, for working to achieve the great outcomes of this meeting, to be able to launch this decade this new decade of work that will take this program, the Montevideo program, into yet new territory and be, as Marcelo says, very successful. I think of it very optimistically myself. I believe that we have achieved the objectives in order to lay the foundation for this decade. But of course, we must have our face-to-face meeting, hopefully next year as planned. I would also like to now invite the Secretariat to provide us some final remarks.
Thank you very much, Tim, for the opportunity to say a few words at the end of this most impressive meeting, which, as you have already highlighted, has not been conducted under the most easy of circumstances. But we are truly encouraged by the active engagement and the guidance and direction you have provided for the successful implementation of the Montevideo program. Tomorrow we are celebrating World Environment Day. And what better message on the eve of World Environment Day than that the international legal community has come together and taken decisive steps to ensure that through the successful implementation of the Montevideo Environmental Law Program, environmental rule of law is strengthened around the globe, and that environmental law can deliver for people and the planet. This is what you have done over the past 3 days, and I think this should not be underestimated. The co-chairs have already outlined to you that now for the first time ever we have a steering committee for the implementation of the Montevideo program. We've agreed to the modalities, and we've had a robust discussion on priority actions for implementation of the program, which I have no doubt will make a great difference as we move forward. And on behalf of the Secretariat, we are, of course, committed to keep working with all of you on this most important journey that now lies ahead of us. And Marcelo, you have, really done us a great favor by reminding us of where the Montevideo program comes from and how it has changed with the times, and how we have now a new opportunity to really advance environmental rule of law around the world. And so the commitment on behalf of the Secretariat is that we are ready to continue this important work with all of you under your direction and guidance. I wish to thank all of you as participants for your strong commitment to the Montevideo program and for your active engagement over the past 3 days. I want to thank the co-chairs, Tim, Marcelo, and the rapporteur, Ms. Kunzang, for their able stewardship of the meeting. I want to congratulate, as I've said, the first ever members of the Montevideo Steering Committee for Implementation. I think that is a great achievement. Congratulations to all the new members. And again, the Secretariat looks forward to work with you on behalf of all the stakeholders in the Montevideo program context. I also want to thank the interpreters. I want to thank the report writers, the technical and other support staff from our colleagues in conference services. And lastly, please do allow me to say a brief word of thanks to all of my colleagues for a job well done on behalf of the Secretariat. Thank you very much, and I hand it back over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Arnold. On behalf of the Secretariat, yes, you and your team have done a very, very excellent job in supporting this group in reaching the decisions made today. And so thank you all. Again, thank you, Marcelo, distinguished co-chair from Uruguay. Thank you, Kunzang, as rapporteur. And thank you all delegates and observers for making this a truly successful first session of the first global meeting. I now shall declare this meeting adjourned until we meet in person, with the dates and locations to be communicated by the Secretariat in due course, taking into account the changing circumstances. Thank you all.